Hi, it's Thomas again from Superstock. Today we're going to go through ESC tuning and how to get all the best features out of your ESC. I'll be tuning the Hobbywing G3X today, and I'll be using the Hobbywing over-the-air dongle. This dongle allows you to access settings in the ESC that other Hobbywing tuning devices don't let you, so we'll be using this one. Anyway, so come around this side and I'll show you. Here I am inside the Hobbywing ESC tuning app. I'm going to hit the chain icon and connect to my ESC.
A few moments later.
I'm inside the settings now. These are actually the settings I run for racing.
Why the fuck you lying?
The G3X is a huge step up from the G2 Speedy. So let's start by looking at each feature and what it does. I'll explain these features within a race setting. So if you're bashing, just keep this in mind. And I'll focus as well on 21.5 turn setup, but you can also use these tips for 13.5 turn. For mod, you'll need to completely use different settings. So I'll explain this in a separate video. So setting mode, there's only two functions, there's basic and advanced. There's no point using this Speedy in basic, in my opinion. You may as well learn how to use it in advanced. So set yours to advanced and I'll walk you through those features. Running mode allows you to adjust whether you have it in forward with brake, forward with reverse, or forward and reverse. You want forward with brake. You're not allowed to use reverse when you're racing. Max reverse force, we don't pay attention to that because we're not using it. Cut off voltage, this one is important. This will make the ESC turn off on its own if the batteries hit a certain voltage, and we don't want that during racing because it could end your race. So I always disable that. ESC thermal, this isn't needed as well, as an auto shut off ESC can end your race. Always run the fan in hot conditions and make sure there is ample room around your ESC. If heat is excessive, remove the stock fan and install a larger fan. So for this one, we always disable it. Motor thermal protection, same story. We don't want our motor to thermal and turn off and end the race. You shouldn't actually be having issues with thermaling. You should actually have your motor set properly. I walk you through how to set up your motor properly in another video, and you can watch that one. So with this one, we put it as disabled. BEC voltage, I used to run 7.4 volt. I recently went to 6.0 volts and I noticed no difference at all in servo speed using my Sanwa M17S. So I suggest you leave this at 6 volts as there's less voltage draw this way. Then we go to smart fan. I've enabled this one. So smart fan again allows for the fan to turn on and off on its own based on whether the ESC is hitting a certain temperature or not. This will allow for less voltage draw if you leave it as enabled, meaning the fan won't turn on at certain times and it will only turn on if it gets hot. Then we go to auto off. I always have this as remote off. Sensor mode, you leave this as full censored. There may be some motors that you may need to run censored or senseless hybrid, but for most racing applications, it's compulsory to run a censored motor. Counterclockwise, so motor rotation, this one is based on whether your motor is positioned in a certain way in the car. Most modern touring cars will require counterclockwise rotation or counterclockwise function. Phase amp or phase AC amp, I leave this as disabled. If you change this, it allows you to change the orientation of the wires. I've never really messed around with this, so I always leave it as disabled. Throttle rate control. So this is actually now the areas where you really want to know what you're doing. This is where you get the most out of your Speedy. For throttle rate control, basically what this does is it dictates how smooth the throttle is. So I set mine to 30 as it will give your throttle a feeling like the throttle trigger has a wider range of movement, giving you more accurate throttle control. If it's too low, your car will feel like it has an on and off switch. So it may feel like it has more punch, but you won't have the throttle control you need. So set this, in my opinion, to 30. Throttle curvature. This one is, I feel, very important in 21 turn. With throttle curvature, often with 21 turn motors, they lack the torque required to punch out of a corner. And in my opinion, this is critical. At a linear setting, it's too soft. So I give my throttle curve a positive curve. I've softened this actually for a recent event, but usually I go a little bit more aggressive where I may move this up around this sort of area. If you go too aggressive though, you may lose throttle control and the car will feel like, again, like an on and off switch, and it may affect the way the car handles on exit of corners. Coast. This is an interesting setting, is rarely used in my opinion, but it may have some function here and there in some settings of racing. It allows the car to move forward even after you let go of the accelerator. This may be important in situations where the car becomes unsettled if you get on and off the throttle, but it's not used often. It may be used more often to use, say, on a larger track. On small tight tracks, you wouldn't want to use this, so I set that to 0. PWM drive is another one that is crucial. So I set mine usually to ramp up from 2 all the way from, say, 0 or 0.5 to 2 to 3.5. I usually don't go over 3 to 4 as 21.5 turn motors can't push this much RPM anyway. And a higher setting will give you slightly more RPM, but we're talking maybe 100 to 200 RPM more. And in all honesty, this is negligible, and you will lose this RPM with other issues with your car, say faulty bearings or a tight driveline, to be honest. So I set mine to be 0 or 0.5 at the start, with 1.5 at roughly the 50% mark, and then I set it to 2 to 2.5 at the end point. Here I've set it to 3, but I don't normally run that high, but for now I'll just leave it. We go down to softening. It's really important that you keep these two values at 0. Softening value has to be at 0 as it's illegal to run softening, and so is softening range. I accidentally ran softening range at 25 once and set softening value at 0, thinking that that was enough to turn it all off, and it isn't. So even with softening value at 0, and even though that turns off all your softening, the speedy won't blink in the right pattern, even if this has a number on it. So you have to both be at 0. And this setting right here, freewheeling, in my opinion, is one that many people don't know how to use, and it's a game changer. The Hobbywing G3X has freewheeling, and I don't think any other ESC company has this. It basically is drag brake without the negative side effects of drag brake. So to enable freewheeling and to use it, first you have to enable it, and then you control it through RPM increase and decrease. The higher you go, the more brake feeling, or the more drag brake-like feeling you get when you let go of the accelerator. So what does this do? What this basically does is it allows you, especially in 21 turn, to drive very hard into a corner, let go of the throttle, and the motor will do the braking for you without the side effects that traditional drag brake has, which is locking up the rear tires, making the rear loose. So it's an incredibly valuable setting, in my opinion, for 13.5 and 21.5. My suggestion is for large tracks, run anything from disabled to enabled at 1 to 2 for a large track, big European style flowing tracks. For tight tracks or medium to large tracks that are tight, I would run maybe 2 to 5 or 6. For example, at South Australia, I felt 8 was really good. And then for very tight tracks, I'd run anywhere from 5 maybe, or 4, all the way up to 10. I used 10 at Cirque at Victoria, and I found that that was a very good setting. So play around with this is very crucial, the setting, and something that allows you to drive very quickly. Drag brake, I don't use this anymore. I've never used it. I don't think it's needed anymore for 13 and 21.5 because we have freewheeling now, which is a better version of drag brake. So I put this at 0. I leave that at auto. Drag brake frequency, well, we're not running that, so it doesn't matter what number that has. And then max brake force, I always set this to 150. And then what I do is I set my brakes to the correct amount at the radio. Keep in mind that every time you recalibrate your speedy, you need to set your brakes to 100% on your radio. Otherwise, you can't calibrate your speedy. So for now, I run 150, probably run about 30 to 40 on my radio, and that's good enough. Another thing to note with your brake, and this is important for any class, is your car should never lock up. So if you are entering into a corner and you're going hard into the brakes and the car loses traction, you should reduce your brake strength on your radio, or you should change your brake frequency. I'll get to that soon. Brake rate control. This one is similar to throttle rate control, where the higher the number, the more sensibility and feeling that you have with the brake. If you go to 1, it's going to feel like an on-off switch. If you go to 20, it's going to have a greater sense of control. Brake control, generally put that as linear. Traditional is like old brushed motors, and disc brake allows you to run ABS. So this is another good setting. I don't normally use this, but if you find that you have to brake very hard and at the last point of your braking point, the car locks up, you should try disc brake, and then you can increase the ABS force. So it stops the brakes from locking and allows you to go very hard into a turn, maybe even use more brakes than you traditionally use without the car braking loose. And then when you use disc brake, you can also use things such as the brake curvature. I don't normally use this. This would be similar to the throttle curvature, where you can adjust whether you run linear or high or low, whatever you want. I don't run that. I tend to leave linear brake feeling. So I will put linear, I will simply run no brake curve. Brake frequency, again, is a very important one. This is what allows the brake to have a greater sense of control. When you run 1K, again, it feels very strong and very bitey, but it lacks finesse. So usually I run 7. For blinky classes, you have to run 0 boost, and your turbo has to be 0. And here, all the way down to the bottom, this is a setting I don't think many people know about, and it's a gear ratio. So what is gear ratio? Well, essentially it allows you to change how much top end you have based on the number you place here. So for example, you may be running 3.5 FDR in your car, but you want a little bit more top end. You can change it to say 3.3 or 3.2 or 3.1. You will lose a bit of torque, but you gain top end. Why is this setting really helpful? Because when you match this to your rollout, you will find the car has more top end, and many people don't. And in the factory, I believe it comes with 4.5, which is very high. So at Moorebank or a large European track, you really need to match this to the FDR you're running to get the correct top end. And why is that? Because the ESC, when you change this, will recognize that you're on a large track, and it will change the manner in which it rolls out the power to suit the track, and it will also give you a bit more top end. And the same goes for tire diameter. So I often just leave this at 63, but if you are running a strange tire that's slightly larger or smaller, you should change it, because that allows then the ESC to recalculate the internal rollout calculations that it's doing, and it will then in turn change the way that it delivers power. That's it. That's how you set your ESC up. I hope you found that useful. And if you haven't seen the motor tuning video yet, go check it out, because they work hand in hand with this ESC tuning video. So that's it from me. It's Thomas from Superstock signing out, and I'll see you at the track.